I'm over it, y'all. It is time to ditch the idea that you have imposter syndrome. And it's time to do it right now. If you plan on rolling with me in 2026, you cannot come along carrying this dead carcass of an idea. Okay? Now, I know you may be worried. You don't know how to toss this idea into the trash or what you'll do with yourself after you've done it. But don't worry, I got you. Don't I always have you? I've got you with the reframes that you need. I'm going to show you how you can ditch this idea and the powerful reframes that you need to give yourself instead. Let's do it.
Hey, Creating Maven. I'm Joy Spencer, your reframe specialist, with one important message. Your real work, it's not your job or your career. Your real work is what you create. And what you create is what sets you apart and makes you incomparable. It's your legacy. I'm here to show you a whole new way of working so you can create with your gifts, make a unique contribution, and finally get paid to be yourself. This is Reframe to Create.
Okay, I'm going to do my best to keep the snark to a minimum, but I make no promises. Let's get to it and talk imposter syndrome, shall we? Because despite all of my best efforts, people are still talking about it. They're still harking its wares, still clutching to it like a security blanket, still declaring boldly and without evidence that we all have it. And I'm sick of it. So let's talk about it, shall we? Now, to be clear, I'm not here to help you get over your imposter syndrome. Nope, I'm not here for that. I'm here to challenge the entire notion itself. I'm here to challenge the worldview and invite you to kick it to the curb completely, because you don't need it in order to address some of the very real, challenging emotions that you're facing. You can address what's really going on without labeling yourself as having imposter syndrome. And I'm going to show you how and why. Now, I have a workshop that's on this matter because I got so frustrated, y'all, that I created a workshop, and it's called A Reframe on Imposter Syndrome. And I've delivered it to many different teams, to development programs, even for a hospital systems manager development week, and at a Women's History Month summit. And what I'm going to share today pulls from some of what I share in that workshop, because I want to make sure that this message gets out there in all the possible places, far and wide. So tell all your friends. And if you or your team need to hear it again in a customized, focused, and special way just for you guys, because you really want to hear it in that special way so that you can work through this, hit me up and we can talk about it. Okay, so let me get into this and just sort of like paint the landscape and picture for you of how this is going to work. I'm going to be asking you a lot of questions, and I'm asking them so that you can coach yourself as I coach you to engage in some deep reflection. And I want you to do this internal and also at times external examination. Because at the root of it, I don't think we're doing enough examination of the ideas that we take in, which is why this notion of imposter syndrome will not die and just keeps spreading. So grab your pen and paper and let us explore. First of all, what is it? And where did it come from, this imposter syndrome? Yeah, let's start with the definition and by interrogating origins. I looked up an official definition of imposter syndrome, and this is what I found. Now, listen closely. A psychological phenomenon in which people are unable to internalize their accomplishments, despite external evidence of their competence. Those with the syndrome remain convinced they are frauds and do not deserve the success they have achieved. Proof of success is dismissed as luck, timing, or as a result of deceiving others into thinking they are more intelligent and competent than they believe themselves to be. Sound familiar? Maybe this is how you've been describing yourself at times when you say you have imposter syndrome. So it's not new, and it's sort of like out there in the zeitgeist, right? Like it's not strange. People are talking about this and diagnosing themselves en masse with this syndrome. So during my workshop, I will ask those who come to share what a person with imposter syndrome may be feeling. And I want you to think about that as well. What does it feel like to feel like you have this imposter syndrome? And folks will usually say an answer with things like, they feel like they don't belong, like they're not smart enough, like someone else can do it better than them, that they kind of like made a mistake when they let them in the room or gave them the job or whatever. And then I ask, okay, so that's what it feels like to feel like you're an imposter or you have imposter syndrome. So what might the opposite of imposter syndrome look, sound, and feel like? And folks will start out with like, well, maybe that's someone who's confident or someone who feels like they belong. And, and there'll be all these positive words. And then there'll always be one person who'll raise their hand and be like, well, technically, if we're talking about the opposite of imposter syndrome and we push this definition to the true opposite, I would say that that's a person who is arrogant and entitled. Ding, 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 ding. And this is always insightful for me to hear and to help me get a feel of the room. Because what's clear to me is that this concept, this idea of imposter syndrome is emotionally charged and it's deep and it goes to the core of how people and how you may see yourself. And it's going to get into some dicey areas. So think about it. If you believe imposter syndrome has to do with feeling less than and not enough and not qualified enough, the opposite is to feel entitled and arrogant. Well, if that's what people are thinking, or if that's what you're thinking underneath the surface, well, what incentive do you really have to move beyond feeling like an imposter? If that's the alternative, entitled, arrogant. In fact, if you hold to certain values, you probably think it's better to feel like you're an imposter, because then at least you're humble, right? You'd say to yourself, well, I may feel like an imposter, but at least I'm not arrogant and an entitled twat, right? So this is deep. And I just want you to reflect on that and think about that. Is that idea that the opposite, or to move out of imposter syndrome, really means to move into arrogance and being entitled, something that's a fear maybe at the back of your mind? Maybe, maybe not, but just hold that thought. Now, I want to continue unpacking all of this stuff that we're talking about by looking at the definition of imposter on its own, like the real meaning of the word imposter, not the definition of imposter syndrome as a phenomenon that's put together, but just the plain old word imposter. So if you whip out your Webster's dictionary, you'll see something like this that defines imposter and an imposter. It is a person who pretends to be someone else in order to deceive others, especially for fraudulent gain. Now, listen to these words. Pretends, deceive, fraudulent gain. Pretends, deceive, fraudulent gain. These are harsh words. And they make me think of real imposters on the big screen, like Leonardo DiCaprio in Catch Me If You Can with Tom Hanks, or the Mike character in the Suits TV series, or the con artist Maddie in the series Imposters, or Val Kilmer in The Saint, or even Anna in Inventing Anna. And if you haven't seen any of these movies or shows, you've got to check them out. They're really good. So all of those people and characters that I've named, these are folks who come to mind when I hear the word imposter. So it's like a real harsh word, and it is a real thing. And if you watch these series, you know that these people are actually doing what the word says. They are pretending to be someone else in order to deceive others, especially for fraudulent gain. So let me ask you this, and I want you to be honest with me, okay? Safe space. For you, is this true? Is it true that you are an imposter? What part of your resume or your life or your credentials is a flat out lie? That position that you have right now, did you lie, steal, or cheat your way there? Did you pretend to be someone else? Did you pretend to have a skill that you don't have? Did you deceive folks by lying to them in order to get your position? If you did, then I hate to break it to you. Yes, you are an imposter, and you really should resign. But in case which I suspect is the case. If you did not, then none of that is true. And you didn't lie to get into your position. You didn't cheat, steal your way in there. You didn't make up a fake identity. Then if none of those things are true, then what gives? Can I challenge you before we go any further into the origins of this idea? Can I challenge you based on the definition of imposter alone to drop this concept completely? Just drop saying it. Words have power. Drop claiming this phrase and slathering it all over your body. Drop it altogether. Just because everyone else is doing it doesn't mean that it's wise. Okay? Because as the saying goes, you can't stop a bird from flying over your head, but you can stop it from building a nest in your head. And I dare say the idea of imposter syndrome is a bird that has built its nest on top of the heads of many people in society without so much as an attempt to swat it away. So I want to interrogate imposter syndrome further, but ask you to first just drop saying that you have it. And I want you to come along with me and for us to ask some questions. Where did this idea come from? This particular phrasing. It's a particular phrasing. So to find out, we've got to rewind the tape to 1978, where two women psychologists, Suzanne Imes, I think that's how you say her name, Suzanne Imes and Pauline Rose Clance, conducted a study of high-achieving women in the workplace who were struggling. And what was their struggle? As per the psychologists, their struggle was that they felt like their achievements weren't due to their own skills or efforts, but due to luck or deception. And this feeling didn't seem to go away for them. And it was through observing this phenomenon, as they called it, this phenomenon in the women, that these psychologists came up with the phrase imposter phenomenon. So it started out as imposter phenomenon before it became imposter syndrome. So, and they also went on to, they developed a diagnostic tool for it. And get this, the name of their full study was The Imposter Phenomenon in High Achieving Women, Dynamics and Therapeutic Intervention. You hear that last part? Therapeutic intervention. So here's my quibble. I mean, I have many. This idea does not live in a vacuum. It has a history, right? The history of imposter syndrome is the imposter phenomenon and this study. It has a history. And that history of that study also has a history. Because the history of women and psychology long before this 1978 study is also a history of pathologizing women's emotions, fears, and concerns. It comes from a history of calling women hysterical, delusional, emotional, and a whole bunch of other things as a way to dismiss very real things that women are dealing with and feeling and observing. And it still happens today. So knowing this origin is important. Even if you are a man today using the phrase for yourself, it's important for you to understand the origin of this terminology, even if you are having some very strong feelings that you feel like and have been defined as imposter syndrome. It's important to know where this particular idea comes from and to ask who it was for and who benefits when women or anyone is using it. And so I say, drop it. It's not benefiting you. It's a powerful narrative, no doubt. I mean, this thing has got legs and is running all around the world. It's a powerful frame, but it's a frame that's keeping you locked in and it's not helping you. Now, I know what you're probably screaming at me on the inside. Joy, I can't drop this idea because this is real. I really do feel this way. I really feel sometimes like an imposter. I feel insecure sometimes. I feel wheezy, queasy, inadequate, or not enough in some spaces sometimes, despite all my credentials. And I get it. I know. And I'm going to get to that. But it's not imposter syndrome. You're not an imposter, and you do not have a syndrome for having the feelings that you do sometimes about inadequacy and insecurity and all that that doesn't mean that you have a syndrome. So hold on a whole minute and let's interrogate this. So what if, just what if, there's more going on in your situation, in anyone's situation? Like, just what if? Let's examine this. What if there's more going on the outside? And maybe something different is going on the inside. But let me start on the outside before I move us to the more difficult and murky inside. What if we examine your environment? And the question is, are you in an environment that's maybe not supportive? Have you run into folks who withhold support and sponsorship at best, or are active saboteurs at worst? Think about what happens to plants that are in environments where they're not getting water, even if you're being nice to the plants in all other regards. Just that withholding, right? They wilt in response, right? That makes sense. We don't blame them and say they have a water withholding response syndrome. When someone steps on your toes and you yell, ow, you don't then go on to apologize to them for feeling the pain. You don't wonder what's wrong with your foot for responding in pain to being stepped on. So sometimes, not always, but sometimes when we are feeling a way about ourselves and our sense of belonging, or if we're welcome somewhere, sometimes it's not in our heads. It's not a syndrome. It's not us or something that we're making up. Sometimes it's because we are socially astute and can feel when the room has gone cold. We can feel when there is a subtle nastiness or turning of the shoulder going on. And honey, that is not a syndrome that you have. You may feel a way, a really, really, really bad way, but you do not have a syndrome. You definitely do not have imposter syndrome because you feel that way in response to that type of behavior. Could it be you are around a bunch of meanies? Meanies and corporate, mean guys and gals. Sometimes we get taught, or people attempt to teach us to be and feel smaller. And that's not an invitation that we have to accept. If we recognize that it's an invitation, then there's a choice to decline. In their Harvard Business Review article called Stop Telling Women They Have Imposter Syndrome, the authors Ruchika Tulsian, and I hope I said her name right, and Jodi Ann Beret, they say that we need to stop saying that women have imposter syndrome because for many women, this is not an illusion or something imagined in their head, but is a result of real systemic bias and exclusion. And we can understand that. So that's something I want you to consider. Is this imposter syndrome that you're feeling a result of someone planting something in your head about your worthiness, your competence, through something they say or do, or how they're treating you, or what they're not saying and not doing? It could have been a long time ago or a short time ago, but that's real. The result and the impact of that is real. You can probably think of something right now where someone said something to you either a while ago or not too long ago that got lodged in your brain, right? Something nasty or sometimes very bland words, right? And sometimes nasty and bland words can have a very lasting impact, right? And it can even come in the form of just questions. Questions like, are you sure about that? Or who do you think you are? Or, well, aren't you special? Like little subtle words, phrases designed to make you do the work of getting yourself back into place. And if those words hurt and make you want to shrink, that's real. And your response does not mean you have a syndrome. It means you are in a negative environment and you should do everything you can to advocate for yourself. Or if that's not safe, you should hightail it out of there. Under no circumstances are you required to bear up or toughen up under abusive behavior, no matter how nice, sweet, and seemingly well-meaning the abuse is. If you are being hurt intentionally or unintentionally by people or systems, well, that's not you who has a syndrome. That's them with the problem. So that's your external environment. Something to just be aware of, to examine before you run off and are sure that you have imposter syndrome or that you have a problem that is an internal pathology. Just scan your environment. But let's talk about internal. We're going to do some coaching, some deep coaching. I'm going to take you to my coaching school, to IPEC, to the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, and I'm going to give you a tool I learned there for working with clients that I want you to have in your own toolkit so that you can also coach yourself, because you need this to help you ask yourself some very important and more questions before that bird of an idea builds a nest in your head. Now, again, I want you to know that I'm not saying that what you're feeling is not real. I'm not saying that at all. What you are feeling is very real. I'm just challenging you to reframe what you call it and how you think about it, because there are real consequences to the narratives that we choose to hold on to and live in. I've seen the imposter syndrome trap people into a losing battle. It's a space that has people thinking there is something pathological happening inside of them when that's not the whole story. What's happening is a human response to human things and choosing to live in frames that you can always choose to reframe. Now, when we pathologize our human experience, it can feel like we are getting control, but we're not. We're disempowering ourselves and sometimes missing when real harm is being done to us by others or our environment. But let's say you're living in Care Bear land where everyone is nice and sweet and welcoming to you, and you just still can't shake this feeling that you don't belong or aren't smart enough or whatever enough. What then if I've stripped you of your imposter syndrome blanket? What then? What are you supposed to do? So here's where we do the coaching work on some very human emotions. And at IPEC, we called it addressing the inner blocks. We called them GAILs, which stands for gremlins, assumptions, interpretations, and limiting beliefs. And I want to coach you through challenging yourself on them. We'll start with limiting beliefs. What is it? A limiting belief is a belief that you have about the world and about other people and about situations and about life in general that holds you back from success. Now, this limiting belief is not necessarily about you personally. So an example is ideas like a woman can never be president, or you must go to an Ivy League school to be successful, or everyone has imposter syndrome. No, so stuff like that. So those are examples of limiting beliefs. And what they do, these limiting beliefs, is they stop you from mounting a challenge before you even start. The idea stands as a solid wall to limit you, to prevent you from even trying to do anything. It limits you, keeps you locked in the frame. It's often something that you don't even question. But you can challenge a limiting belief. And I did that with you right from the beginning when I simply asked, is it true? You can challenge a limiting belief by simply asking, is it true? Or how true is it? These questions help to open your eyes to the fact that you are sitting in an invisible frame, and it lets you come back to choice and helps you to decide, do I still want to choose to stay in this frame or not? Is it true? How true is it? What has believing this held me back from? Sometimes this is all a person needs to help them burst out of the imposter syndrome frame and get back to their power and choice. But sometimes it's deeper, and we need to go a layer deeper with our exploration of the inner blocks. And that brings us to interpretations. An interpretation is the opinion or story you create around an event, situation, or experience. These are harder to wrestle with than limiting beliefs because they are much more personal. A limiting belief might just be a statement about how the world is, but an interpretation is something you are attaching to real living experiences that you're having. So say you walk into a room and everyone stops talking. What? What just happened? Now you think you know how to interpret this, but there are many different ways. One person might think, I knew it. They all hate me. And another person might think, great, I've made a grand entrance and they are all stunned. Same situation, different story, different interpretation. Sometimes getting our power back from the imposter syndrome idea is taking back our power of interpretation. Simply remembering that there's more than one way to look at a thing can bring you back to choice by asking, what's another way I could look at this? Or how might my friend Frank see this? Or how might someone with the opposite view see this? We can get out of the trap of thinking that there's only one way to see a thing and always thinking that it has to be a way that has us in a one-down position if we just dare to question and interrogate our interpretation. But this can be hard because we know what we know, right? And nobody can tell us differently, especially when we've had the experience happen many times before. That's the power of assumptions as an inner block. An assumption is a belief that because something has happened in the past, it is automatically going to happen again. These are, again, based on your own personal experiences. And if you think about it, these are tough to get out of. You tried for that same job 4 times. Why should you try a 5th time? You've got real personal data to back up your assumption that the future is going to be the same as the past. So why should you even try? Challenging your sense of imposter syndrome that's based on your assumptions about experiences that you've had repeatedly in the past is tough, right? This is like where we're getting into like our trauma. It's tough, but it's not impossible. You can still challenge your assumptions by reframing your perspective from what you're trying to avoid to asking yourself, what would I like to see happen? What has worked well in the past? Where am I strong and how can I leverage that to help me today? It's perfectly human to recoil from past failures and want to curl up in a ball and never try again. And sometimes we get stuck in that and need help getting out. And sometimes we get stuck in that and want to label ourselves as a security blanket, as to, I've had all these failures and now I have imposter syndrome. But there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you from wanting to avoid hurt. You don't have a syndrome if this happens. You're just human, and challenging your assumptions and being willing to try again will bring you back to choice. But the deepest and toughest inner block is the gremlin. Yeah, it's as horrible as it sounds. The gremlin is that voice inside that you seem not to be able to get rid of and that follows you around, yapping every time you're about to get to something good. The voice that says you're not enough, you're not smart enough, you're not tall enough, you're not whatever enough. And it always seems to go for your weakest spot. And even having this does not mean that you have a syndrome. It's a very human thing, and most people just lie down and take it. And that's what I want to offer you today. You don't have to lie down and take it. You can and should talk back. You can challenge this idea, you can challenge this voice by asking yourself some questions, preferably out loud so that you can not stay alone in your own head. It's back to that great question from the beginning. Is it true? How true is it really? That I'm not smart or qualified enough. I surely didn't lie and cheat and fool my instructors into giving me this degree and certification. Why am I making this moment about me and my worth? Is it really that serious? Like, why does it always have to become this existential judgment about who I am? Is my worth really based on what I achieve? What does being enough mean? And why do I have to be enough in the first place? You've got to talk back. You've got to ask your own questions. You've got to challenge and get your own reframes. You've got to get back to choice. So this is how you inoculate yourself against the idea that you have imposter syndrome, this thing that's going to have you locked in this space thinking that you have some sort of pathology. An idea that isn't true, that doesn't help you, and merely limits you. First, you have to ask, am I in a safe environment? Because, real life. Actually pay attention to who is around. Pay attention to the systems and the messages that you're getting. Pay attention to the words that are said and that are not said. Are you being invited to feel small, worthless, and insecure? That's your first sign that you don't have imposter syndrome for feeling bad about being in that type of space, because feeling bad in that type of environment is the correct self-preserving human response, and you should fight back or get out. But whatever you do, don't accept the label that pathologizes your correct response. Now, when you've determined that you're in Care Bear land and you're still feeling a kind of way and inadequate, and maybe from some residual bad experiences or just whatever, you can't explain it, don't syndromize yourself. I just made up that word. Don't syndromize yourself as you go to work on using these reframes that I have coming up next, which I think is the antidote. So here they are. 1, confidence is learning to stay in your own body. In episode 27, called Confidence, 5 C's of a Creating Maven, I talked about this idea because this is my definition of confidence: learning to stay in your own body. Not knowing how to stay in your own body is what I think causes a lot of people to have anxiety. When you are trying to guess what other people are thinking about you or trying to control what they think about you, you are stepping out of your own body and trying to peer into and control other people's minds. And it will wreck you. It will wreck your confidence and break you. It's a habit we have. It's a habit that somehow gets affirmed in society because people will stand around speculating about what someone else is thinking, and nobody thinks to just go ask the person or stop speculating. But it's this habit. And if you're not going to ask the person what they think directly, then you need to get out of the habit of speculating, at least if you want to get your confidence back. 2, and this is from Marie Forleo, everything is figure-outable. I love it. I love it. And if you don't know Marie, you should check out her work. She's the go-to business guru. And it's the title of her book and a phrase that she uses all the time. And I love it because it just turns the volume down on needing to know the answer before you go to work and figure something out. It's figure-outable. And get this, you don't have to figure it out by yourself. You've got friends, family, mentors, and Google. We are not living this life alone on an island. A lot of times our feelings of inadequacy come because we don't like feeling like we can't do it all on our own or without needing help. Even after getting the degrees and studying, even after you've gotten the degree and the certification, you're still going to need to ask for and get help and learn and grow. And that is the reality of our limits as humans. It's not a flaw to be limited. It's not a bug, it's a feature. And it's beautiful. We need each other, and we are all figuring it out, and everything is figure-outable. 3, I don't have to win. I just have to learn. Not everything is a race or a competition. Not everything in life is about winning. In fact, most of life is just you learning. So lean into that and don't despise the fact that in many things or most things, you're a beginner. You're still learning. So embrace that life is all learning. 4, I belong in every room I enter. I heard this from Julia Metcalf and I still love it. What would it feel like to try on this reframe for size? Instead of automatically looking for a way to discount your presence in a room, what if you told yourself that you belong in every room that you enter? Perhaps for no other reason than my final reframe, which is this: I have gifts and they are meant for service. So much of our sense of inadequacy or feeling like we are imposters is because we are focused on ourselves in that moment. We're focused on ourselves and how we're being thought of and how we're being judged and how we're performing. And that makes us lose sight of our purpose in service. You have gifts to offer in every room that you enter. And if you look for how you can contribute and be of service, not because you want to look relevant and you're forcing that contribution, but because you're sitting back observing and truly looking for how you can be of service, it takes a lot of the sting out of, do I belong here or what's going on here? So when you have this feeling, which you're defining as quote unquote feeling like an imposter, it might be time to ask yourself if you just lost sight of your sense of gifts that you're here to offer in service. I get it. It can be hard. But the thing about it is, you're not alone in your feelings, and you're not helpless in them either. You're not locked in a syndrome. You're just a human who struggles sometimes. Sometimes because other folks are mean twats, and other times just because you're letting birds build nests in your head. So remember, you're not an imposter. You don't have a syndrome. You're a human who is on the journey to create with your gifts and offer them in service in the right places. So this is what you do. The next time you want to say you have imposter syndrome, or someone says you have it, or everyone has it, or whatever, I want you to take a deep breath and ask, is it really true that I'm an imposter? Is it? See you soon, Creating Maven. Until then, remember to ask, what will we create?